Good evening, everyone. My name is Deacon Andrea LeBoux, and I want to officially welcome you to our town hall meeting today. Your voice, your vote. We have an exciting evening planned for you with some, when I say riveting guests and questions and comments. We want to hear from you, but we want this to be conversational. I ask that our live audience call someone, tell someone what we're doing tonight. Click like, share on all your social media platforms. I guarantee you do not want to miss this discussion. We want, once again, this to be an informational session and educational as well, but we really want it to be conversational. There's so much going on these days, and there's so much happening in terms of the political process. We want to learn, engage, and find out and figure out ways where we can move forward and learn from each other, but also talk about how we can look at the past and moving forward. So with that said, once again, like, share, put your comments. We do have someone in monitoring the chat. So this is conversational. We want you to put your questions and comments in the chat section. Please know that we'll try and get to as many of them as we can. We will probably be doing that the last 10 or 15 minutes of our session. So don't think that we forgot about you or your questions or comments are not important. We're just going to save all that till the end. So with that said, I think all the business is out of the way. I have the honor and pleasure of introducing our guest speakers today. Can I just say, we are politically packing on this screen today. I'll just say it like that. But I want us to be aware of the wealth of information and knowledge that is sitting before us, and their willingness to serve and share their knowledge with us. So without further ado, I will introduce our first panelist for this evening. Oh, Mr. Gee, how are you? We're just getting started. So we're just starting with introductions. So thank you for joining us.
Sure.
Our first panelist that I will introduce is Marilyn Davis. She's got the red glasses. I've got the green glasses. Marilyn Davis is a seasoned strategist and expertise in advocacy, organizing, and community engagement, with a background spanning federal and state governments, organized labor, electoral, and issue campaigns. Ms. Davis has played pivotal roles in multiple presidential campaigns, including as a consultant to the Obama for America campaign and as the Wisconsin political director for John Kerry's 2004 presidential campaign. Ms. Davis served as the National Director of Community Engagement at the Democratic National Committee. Her extensive career includes senior roles in government and electoral politics, including serving as Deputy Director for Congressional Affairs in the 2013 Presidential Inaugural Committee. Marilyn is returning to her entrepreneurial roots. She's launched a public affairs firm on May 5th, 2024. She's previously served as the president and chief executive officer of Davis and Associates, LLC, a firm that focused on campaign management, fundraising, political strategy, organizing, and community outreach. Wow, that's a mouthful. But please, if I missed anything, please jump in. Our next guest, Mr. Gee, that would be you. Mr. G has spent his entire life in service to the public. His credits include founder of Stono Public Affairs. Forgive me if I'm not pronouncing it right. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yes, I did it. Okay. Former congressional chief of staff and deputy manager of voter registration campaigns, regional and national. His work building the Democratic Party to register voters, designing and implementing strategies to reach and proactively engage previously disenfranchised voters extends from the most local levels of government directly into the halls of Congress and the West Wing. James has worked on countless state, local, and federal races across the country. In New Jersey alone, he was deputy chief of staff in the McGreevey administration and served as a senior advisor to the Corzine for governor, Booker for Senate, and Murphy for governor campaigns. James is as comfortable speaking with those who occupy the circles of power in Washington and celebrities known throughout the world as he is speaking with your neighbor. I love that, Mr. G. I do. And that's going to be a lot of what we do tonight. Our next guest is Mr. Ken Johnston. If you remember, we did a session with Mr. Johnston probably about 2 weeks ago. Mr. Johnston, Walk to Freedom is a Philadelphia-based initiative started by Mr. Johnston, a walking artist who responds to the call of social change and history by walking to put movement back into the civil rights movement. In 2022, Ken completed over 700 miles. I'm going to say that again because I can't imagine that. 700 miles tracing Harriet Tubman's footsteps between known Underground Railroad communities from Poplar Neck, Maryland to St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. This past June, Ken commemorated Juneteenth with a 65-mile walk to freedom from Galveston to Houston. Internationally, he has walked across Ireland, symbolically linking its short-lived civil rights movement with the U.S. and across Puerto Rico on the second anniversary of Hurricane Maria, following the trajectory of the devastating storm's past. Thank you, Mr. Johnson, for what you do. And then the person that I want to be when I grow up would be our next introductory panelist is Reverend Dr. Zina Pierre. Dr. Pierre is the founding president and CEO. Is it Ray Harp Strategies? I want to make sure I'm pronouncing it right.
It's prayer
Ray
spelled
Harp?
backwards.
Oh, wow. I didn't get that, but I love it. A consultancy specializing in government relations, political advocacy, strategic alliance development, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and business development. With over 30 years of experience in national politics, Dr. Pierre has played a pivotal role in developing outreach strategies and partnerships for a diverse range of industry clients. Dr. Pierre's public service career began during the Clinton administration, where she held several key positions, including a commissioned officer role as special assistant to the president for intergovernmental affairs. Her influence extends into the media, having worked with major television networks such as Fox 5 DC, NBC News Channel 8, and USA Today. Dr. Pierre is deeply committed to community service and has held leadership roles in numerous boards. And last but not least is our own bishop. We will take a second to introduce. He waves his hand, but we'll just say Bishop Evans embodies the phrase, "It is not where you start, but where you finish." As pastor of the 27,000 member Bethany Baptist Church, a frequent TPN host, and the author of Heal Without Scars, he uses his platform to inspire others. He founded Generations Inc. in 1993 to address community needs and became bishop of the Abundant Harvest Fellowship of Churches, which encompasses over 175 congregations worldwide. Under Bishop Evans' leadership, Bethany Church has thrived, driven a mission of evangelical healing, and economic development. And let me just say, I told you we were packing tonight. We are politically packing tonight. And I just want to once again thank everyone for coming on board and spending your time with us. So with that said, and the business being out of the way, we're going to jump right into our conversation and start talking about the things that we're here to talk about: voting, civic engagement, and all these things that we hear there's so much happening these days. Our first topic will actually be on civic engagement and our responsibility. We hear this all the time, but what does that actually mean? All of this political stuff that we hear can feel empowering and overwhelming at the same time, and can leave some of us, including myself, can leave some of us feeling like my vote, my voice doesn't matter. My one vote will not make a difference in the electoral process. But how important is it for all of us? And I will emphasize that all of us to vote and get involved. And what does my one vote, we're talking to people who may be disengaged. What does my one vote, or in terms of voting and voter turnout, what does my one vote say about the state of politics or the health of democracy in our country? Okay, that's a big question. That's a big question, and it's one that people often struggle with. So I can let you jump in, but I can call on someone. So anybody want to start?
I'm happy to jump in.
Okay, perfect.
I will say that the fact that we can still vote in America means we're not like Venezuela or any other of the authoritarian countries that do exist. We don't live in a communist country where our voices don't matter. So our vote is an example of our ability to exercise our voice and also project the future that we want to see in our country. I think when people say my vote doesn't matter, well, we did see how your vote does matter in 2020. When you elect a leader who either A, listens to the people or does not listen to the people. And for those of us who were impacted by COVID, I mean, I lost relatives impacted by COVID who died from COVID. And had we had a leader at that time who took it seriously, perhaps my aunt will be alive today, right? So I think it's really important. If we don't remember anything else, aside from the $1,200 check that was given to some people, we should remember that leadership matters. And during COVID, we saw the lack of leadership and how COVID affected our communities.
Excellent. Anybody else want to jump in?
I think that we should take time to look at where we are and where we live, and really delve into voting. A lot of people don't look at how many people actually vote, and if you don't think your vote matters, it's probably because you have probably not looked at the turnout. Because if you look at turnout, you'll notice that there are towns in New Jersey where 700 votes will make you mayor. There are places in New Jersey where 500 votes will get you a council seat. And unfortunately, those are a lot of places where we live. And I'm involved in the project right now where I'm looking at everywhere where African Americans in particular live. And there are towns where the undervote, meaning that there are people registered, like they're already on the rolls, but they don't show up. There's towns where there's 16,000 people who are registered to vote, and 1,600 people actually vote. And so you don't think your vote matters because you haven't looked around. There's some people who have parties that are bigger than 1,600 people. There were 300 people at my wedding. Based on my wedding, I could get elected to 5 or 6 towns in New Jersey. So I think that people who say their vote don't count are people that don't understand what it takes to get elected in most towns.
I would add to that, that when you understand how public policy impacts your pocketbook, it will get you to the polls. But the problem is that for many of our communities is lack of education, and I'm not saying lack of education from a person's personal, but understanding the issues, understanding what down the ballot means and how important it is that when you pick a state's attorney, what the state's attorney will represent for Pookie and them. And so, voter turnout is we're at a very critical place historically. I don't think we'll ever see, I hope we don't ever see what we've seen in this last year. And for those who keep saying, well, I don't know her, you weren't paying attention for the last 4 years. Because it's almost impossible to say that you don't know someone that's been your vice president for 4 years. Someone may say that, okay, well, she, I don't know her enough to believe that she could be president. Well, you have to remember, she just came on board in August. And so to turn around the way that things have turned around, and I know this is a nonpartisan conversation, We want to make certain that we protect the 501c3 status of Bethany Baptist Church. So let me just put that out there. But we have to know the issues, learn the issues. And that's why so much misinformation and disinformation is out there that causes voter turnout to be a challenge. But I'm excited to see that 49 million people have casted their votes during early vote and voting, as well as mail-in ballots. And so it's a very telling thing, although, and James can tell you, and Marilyn can tell you, that we're a little bit low on our on the blue side, and they're a little bit high on the red side, but that does not mean that the outcome is going to be different when November 5th hits, because for many who may be coming out now, the question is how many of them will come out on November 5th to really take us over the top. So I know I sort of ranted on with this, but
no, that was perfect, and I especially love the Pookie in them. You know, I mean that's what we're talking about. How do we get the everyday person to feel engaged and civically feel civically responsible, but feel as if the political process and the political systems actually affect them and affect us in our everyday lives. And sometimes if I don't understand that, I will disengage because it seems like it's a them versus me, and I don't necessarily connect to those systems, or they don't connect to me. I should say that. Would anybody else like to add anything onto that? Yeah,
I would like to add, when I think of civic engagement, I think of this Black school janitor who I didn't personally meet, but I met his spirit on one of my walks across New Jersey. I arrived in Perth Amboy, and there I learned about a school janitor named Thomas Mundy Peterson. He was the first African-American in the United States to vote immediately after the passage of the 15th Amendment. And when I arrived at that former Middle Passage city, I thought about what it took for him to step up to that box and to place his vote in that box. His parents were enslaved, and he grew up in that area. And not only was he the first Black janitor of that school, but he was also civically engaged in the community, helping to pass local laws and amendments. So he went far beyond just casting that vote. And today, we have to also remember what it just takes to get there, and the people whose shoulders we stand on.
Absolutely, and that is a perfect segue into my next question in terms of the sacrifices that those before us had to make for us to have the right and the freedom to vote, and how I guess we shouldn't forget that, but how things are starting to come back, if I could, for lack of better words, and recycle, where they say history recycles itself. We are experiencing that right now through Project 2025. So we're going to go in on this for just a minute. We talk about if Project 2025 is enacted, local and national elections could face significant challenges that undermine the integrity of the political process. Our political representation may no longer, may no longer be effective or concerned with addressing the needs of certain communities. So we're talking about the cyclical process of history repeating itself. What, if any, concerns do you have concerning voting and civic engagement or civic protection if Project 2025 is enacted? That's a really big question.
It seems to me that the re-engagement in our community of the church is an absolute necessity, because we do have the ears, our pulpits have the ear of the people. And the engagement is based upon the degree of passion and aggression that we bring to the political process. It is, it's almost like history is repeating itself. if not for the aggression of the African American church in the civil rights days, as I remember them, they probably would not have the strength of the movement as it was. But that's being renecessitated now. We've got a culture of people who are disengaged politically, who are simply trying to live their lives and kind of hoping for the best. So, but we can't complain about what we haven't impacted. So we have to say something and then follow it with action. The church is absolutely essential for this re-engagement of minority communities. And it really depends, it falls on us pastors to constantly keep this voting and political engagement and boiling down Project 2025, because I believe it was written with such a length that most of us would not ever read it. So it fell on the church to translate the moment so that people would be inspired to vote, because their lives and lifestyles are hanging on this particular vote. We have to, and politics is not comfortable. Being a resident of New Jersey, we have a unique set of politics in our state. I often joke that the book, The Soprano State, the only problem with it is that it was true. So it was that was the issue with the book. So, you know, it can be frightening to be involved in politics where we are locally. But I echo James's sentiment. You can win a congressional seat really close to us with 2,300 votes. And knowing that, we have kept track of how many members we have in different districts that are voting. So we know what we can influence just based on population. But I'm not sure a lot of us are being that granular with understanding, you know, what we can affect. We even are tracking what we have in Philadelphia, because we've got a couple thousand members in Philadelphia. And that can make a difference in a local election. So we've got to get re-engaged. The church has got to regain its civil rights passion, so that we inform people, educate people, let them know what the consequences are for a lack of involvement.
Bishop, you so on it, because you know better than I do that the church was always the nucleus of the community. It was the place where all the politicians knew they if they didn't go, they probably wouldn't win, because it was an opportunity for them to come and engage and kiss a baby, take a picture, and call it a day. And then you wouldn't see him again until, you know, it was such time to run for office again. And you know, when Deacon LeBou talked about the whole, you know, our civic engagement, the mandate that we have, it reminds me of all the stuff that a lot of these stakeholder groups are doing. All of these ancillary affinity groups have been established. I mean, we're in an era right now like we haven't been in a very long time, where people are doing just what we're doing tonight. This is my third Zoom. I did one with NAACP on Monday night, had one on Saturday night, another one tomorrow, another one next Monday, because that's how important this election is to all of us. And I think that, you know, the church is falling back in place slowly but surely. I think that part of why it was pulled out was the many challenges of fear. You know, when you've got a 501c3, you got a CDC, and you getting government money and all of that, it makes you shrink sometimes. But I believe that we've got our voice back in the church, and people will listen, because when you find people like yourself who 100% of your church are registered voters, that says something to a politician. And so you have a bully pulpit such as yours, that says something to a politician. And so I believe that the church is getting its voice back. slowly but surely.
I had a party boss that some of us know very well tell me basically that they could not make a move at one time without the African American clergy affirming and approving. And what they took advantage was disunity and separation. And what that did in their minds was make us somewhat irrelevant. So we had to start raising up pockets of assertion and bringing in as many people as possible. So like in our state now, because of the churches that we had, governor's race, correct me, James, if I'm wrong, or Marilyn, has not been decided by more than 200,000 or 300,000 votes.
Mm.
And what we had to do was coalesce that political multiple, and that they know, based on the families we have in the state, we take up about 150,000 of those. Mm-hmm. That's when we started getting the attention we should have gotten and the respect that we should have gotten.
I'll tell you a thing that's very relevant. There's no, I mean, in a primary in New Jersey, people don't realize the primary happens in June. And in June, there's a white tradition in June that as soon as the sun comes out, white people have to go to the shore. It's like they have to. So the first week of June is the primary in New Jersey. And a little unknown secret is that white people don't vote in the primary either. As a matter of fact, Black people have made up upwards of 41% of primary voters. And that is when there's no Black candidate on the ballot. So the most consistent Black voter, we all know, is a Black woman over the age of 55. And that's who's making up that almost 40%. But if we add to that some Black men and some Black children and some Black students, I think we can get that higher. And if Black people voted between 47 and 48% of the vote, we decide who runs for governor in the general. And what the enemies of our community, the game that they play on us, is that we don't know that.
Yeah.
And so they don't tell you how you can't win. They just tell you you can't win. And so because they tell you you can't win, we don't aspire to do it. It's almost like them telling us for ages you couldn't be the quarterback. Now they told us you couldn't be the quarterback because you can't think very well. And I always wondered, a quarterback needs to think well, throw well, and run well. The only thing that the traditional white quarterback could do was think well. He couldn't run too. I want one that could do all three. Now everybody wants one that can do all three.
Yeah.
But as long as we believe that you had to have this one skill set, you couldn't have anything else, we would go along with having, Danny White as the quarterback. It wasn't until we realized you need the best athlete on the field to have his hand on the ball at all times. And we're like, hey, we could do that too. And I think that same game has been played on us in terms of governor's races and statewide Senate races, that you don't know enough. But once you know enough, you now have an obligation to do something about it.
And if I can jump in too, because I think the Bishop Evans said something that is very critical. And he said that the church, his church in particular, has been looking at the data. And in business, data is king. And I would also say that COVID knocked us, the community and the church in particular, on our behinds. We got caught flat-footed. And we are still rebounding from the impact that COVID has had on our delegation. So what we have to do as a community is get back to organizing and organizing our churches and organizing our communities. And that's not sexy work. That's not easy work. That is laborious. And that means we have to have teams in place to go to communities and talk to individuals about the importance of coming back into the church so that the church maintains the power base it has historically had. And if we do not, especially in New Jersey, our power base will continue to decline. And we're seeing that. We've seen it, we've witnessed it in New Jersey in particular. When you replace Senator Wayne Bryant, when you replace Mayor Sharp, when we replaced Mayor Bowser in East Orange. Every time they replaced a strong, independent, civic-minded, community-involved leader, they replaced them with people who did not have the same level of commitment to the community when it comes to organizing and communicating to the community. And therefore, our political base in New Jersey has declined. So yeah, we got a lieutenant governor, but we lost 20 other positions and therefore lost the political power associated with those 20 other positions. And if the church doesn't take its rightful position at the helm of the community, the power base in New Jersey will continue to decline.
Can I add to what you're saying, Marilyn? Because the church of old is, as we see it post-COVID, is not the same look anymore. That our influence is more on social media than it is, inside the building. And so now, that we're in this sort of hybrid sort of lifestyle of ministry. Is that me? That's not.
It's my 10-year-old calling me.
But now that the church is in this sort of hybrid society of partially in, partially out, or some still all out, and then some are back in, the influence of a pastor's voice is more important now than ever before, and how he uses his bully pulpit is really important, because many of, like Bishop Evans, I'm not blowing smoke because he's my bishop, but when he goes out there and says something, he's a trusted voice. So whether he posts a flyer or whether he's preaching behind the pulpit, it still carries the same weight because of who he is. And so, but I think that as we have all of these trenders out here now in the kingdom that are trending on social media, we need to find a better way to galvanize them, Marilyn, to ensure that they are doing all the stuff that we do inside the church on social media to really get the message out. So I think we miss that with a lot of these preachers, and a lot of them are non-denominational preachers that are really out there doing their thing, and we miss that because we're so mainstream. If you're not Baptist, if you're not AME, CME, AME Zion, sometimes the party people don't pay attention to you because they don't know all of these non-denominational folks. But those are the ones that are out there doing it.
They do know numbers. They do know numbers. They know that when they go into a particular church, especially like Bethany, and they see that 27,000 members, they know that. But then we have to be honest with ourselves that there aren't many churches that have even 1,000 members, let alone 27,000. And therefore, when they go into these churches and they say, well, pre-COVID, they would have had X thousands of members. Right. Post-COVID, they got a couple of hundred. So now they're shifting their mindset when it comes to the impact of the church beyond the ones that I'm gonna call them mega churches, right? Beyond the mega churches, and there aren't many mega churches in New Jersey, in particular.
But there's mega followers on social media. So I may have 50 people in my church, but I may have 20,000 people following me. And so we got to look at this a little different.
I think we got to look at it differently and not worry about what they see. It's what we see. Yeah. So you have a church of 50. You have a church of 50. The most consistent voter is a 55-year-old or older Black female, but she leaves 2 votes at home on average in New Jersey. That means she got a trifling nephew or a son that's at home on the couch. And we got to figure out how to get her to understand who she is and what she got to do, because you turn that 50 into 1,500. I just told you could be mayor in several towns. You got 50. A 50 church storefront can change the world. The issue is somebody's got to pay attention to everybody voting. I remember in 2012, Bonnie Watson Coleman decided to run for a seat that was 67% white. And my white friends in politics laughed at me. And somebody asked me, hey, what you going to do after this campaign is over? And I said, I think I'm going to go work in Congress. I never worked in Congress before. And they began to laugh and said, there ain't no way that Black lady can win that district. The district is held by Rush Holt. Rush Holt is literally a rocket scientist. He literally is the whitest white man in America. There's no way in the world you could win that seat. But the reason why I knew we could win that seat is because on one end of that seat was a church called Shiloh of Plainfield. And it wasn't just a black church, it's a black middle class church. And I'll come back to that. And on the other end of that district was another church called Shiloh of Trenton. And it was the same kind of church that was in Plainfield on the other end. And in between, there's this little church called the First Baptist Church of Somerset. And of all of those churches, Somerset is the most middle class church. So I know that those folk are going, at least they would be embarrassed if I told them that I knew that they didn't vote. But the state elected official didn't know that was there. And so he was at a disadvantage. He didn't know what I knew. And I knew that when Rush Holt ran, on average, those churches produced 7% black people voted. When Bonnie Washington ran, 87% of black people eligible to vote voted. And she won by 64%.
You all have unknowingly answered like 3 of the questions I had on my list in terms of how do we re-engage people and how do we the importance of not necessarily the national elections but the local elections, and how do we engage people in local elections. And I'm hearing that it really is a high touch format that we need to go back to the basics of, people respond to people and go into churches and do almost like cell work in terms of educating people, about the systems that exist and the policies that exist. Just like Marilyn, like you said, okay, we got this, but we lost all of this. And it is a basic flaw, unfortunately, in the system that we just aren't taught this information. And I remember what was that we used to watch on Saturday afternoons, I'm Just a Bill sitting on Capitol Hill. Okay, we don't do those type of things anymore. So the opportunity to learn this information, even as a child, is gone, but also as a community and people who all of this policy and these issues affect us on our everyday lives, and can cause us from going from getting 4 bags of groceries to 2 bags of groceries, just by a policy or belief that's put in place through a local election. So thank you for answering that question. We're going to move on to sort of the next topic in terms of challenges and barriers. And you've already answered about 2 or 3 of those questions as well. There's a historical there's a history of distrust in the government and the political process. There's a distrust in government institutions, elections, and political leaders. For whatever reasons, this mistrust has sometimes acted as a barrier to voting and once again getting engaged and even bothering to vote. I love what someone said. I think Mr. G, you said it. Get off the couch and vote, but it's not going to bother. It's not going to matter. What can be done to rebuild trust in the electoral process or politics in general, especially in communities that feel disillusioned or neglected by the very system that's supposed to protect and serve us and serve them? So what can we do to address that whole distrust or that whole thing that it doesn't matter and they're not going to do anything for me?
I'm going to say something that I think might stir up a little heat.
Surprise.
I think the suspicion with the system absolutely is connected to a lack of knowledge about the system. I think that a lot of times we hide our heads in the sand and hope for the best, and then respond to our present emotionally rather than with knowledge that we've learned. I think Project 2025 is an excellent example. As I've asked people, have they read it? I know the answer is going to come. No. Have you looked into it? Well, I started, but it's too long. So what we need to know about the future is buried in the document. So we have suspicion, but it's based on how we feel, not based on what we know. So even if we take responsibility for not pursuing understanding, we still want to not vote, which is a response to not knowing what we're voting about. The other thing that I have a problem with the fact that it appears as though people can be bought with a check. I've got an issue with the check that I got, that I went out and bought a flat screen TV is enough for me to vote for you again. I've got an issue with that. So we've got to, knowledge and understanding is key to any assertive move that we make anywhere in life, especially when it comes to voting and being a part of the system. We've got to have an understanding. I'm back to the church again. Sometimes you have to drag church folk kicking and screaming into the will of God. So it's up to us to inform. And the other thing, and you guys know this better than me, you can't approach the church for unity 2 months before the election. It's got to be something that starts before the last election, because it's going to take that much time to mold an ununified body. And it's disunified based on style, not substance. So we've got these style issues. But if I can be biblical for a moment, the Bible says it's not by your style, it's by my spirit, says the Lord. So we can get unified around Jesus crucified, buried, and risen, and then go after the issues. But it's up to us to inform the people at our level of involvement with them. Yeah. And that's part of the suspicion. We don't understand the system.
I think that we have to go ahead. I'm sorry.
The uniqueness of the church, and again, going back to the data, going back to looking at your 27,000 member congregation. If you look at, and this is for all churches, if you look at your membership, and not only we want to know where you live, we want to know where you work. We want to know what is it that you do. So if you are a lawyer, there's an opportunity to bring you before the people to talk about the legal system. If you are a teacher and you're teaching on the elementary level, then we can have you come in and talk to parents about the critical need to really make sure your child can read and write in 4th and 5th grade in particular, right? Those years are very critical for a youth. And if you are a parent, a teacher in the high school system, then there's an opportunity for you to come in and talk to the congregation about what the kids need on that level. And then if you were in, because most of us, one of the things in Project 2025 that Trump is that they are proposing and that I'm sure Trump is going to implement is removing any kind of demographic information from most of the agencies, so that we don't know how many African Americans you serve. And they're going after the civil service status for federal government employees because that's where most Black people work. We're not at the high levels, we're at the low levels in government. And I say that to say that there's an opportunity for us to bring in our friends and cousins and families who have that experience in the federal government and the state government, who can talk to us about the things that are happening in the workforce development system, what the jobs are in the workforce development system, or who can tell us about the funding that's been given to the state by the federal government to build a new bridge into New York City. That's the largest infrastructure project that's happening in the United States. And how do we make sure that Black businesses are getting access to those dollars? Over $1 billion project is coming, the largest infrastructure project in the United States. How do we make sure that Black businesses, Black construction companies, Black architecture, Black engineering firms, Black lawyers, Black fiduciary firms who focus on fiduciary oversight, how do we make sure they're getting that business, right? So those of us who are in position where we have access to information need to be called to the front of the class to share that information, so that we as a community, and it may not be Bethany in South Jersey that has the ability to address that need or that's happening over here. Maybe it's Bethany in North Jersey that can help, right? So we can figure out, create this network so that we can exchange information and exchange resources. And then if I can't help you, maybe somebody else can help you, but help the congregation understand all these different nuances from the federal to the state to the county and to the local level, to the municipal level, because things are happening and we're missing it. But there are some of us in position. I remember one time my great aunt told me, she says, well, we lived in Prairie View. And so everybody at Prairie View had the opportunity to knock their heads against the school system, right? So those of us who are in these jobs, we have an opportunity to hear, like the spook who sat by the door, what's happening in these rooms that can be shared with the community to say, hey, I may not know the full story, but I know enough to say, y'all need to come over here and look and see what's happening.
I think that's the real power of the church, right? The real power of the church is, if you start to really think about it, there's not a lot of places where the Huxtables of the world and the Good Times of the world cross section. That you got a bunch of people who are AKA Boule, Jack and Jill. They are dealing with a set of problems, and then there are people who are struggling to survive every day. And our power is when the two work together. And the church is powerful because I grew up in a church. Both of my parents were factory workers, but their friends in the church were lawyers and doctors, and they mixed and mingled. So it was nothing to me to know a judge or to know a politician, because they went to my church. At no other place would we interact. Someone said to me, hey, is Kamala really black? A long time ago in my barbershop. And I said, yeah, she's an AKA. And when I looked back at him, I realized he had no idea what I was talking about. But how would he? Grew up in Trenton. He works at a barbershop. He don't know what an AKA is. Nobody in his family went to college. I think that we forget about the stratas. And I think the way to fix that is we got to bring to the church and to everybody in our community something that impacts them. Like the expungement process, right? There are communities where you get in a little trouble and then you get your life together. Now you're 27. That little trouble could still hinder you from getting certain jobs, getting a CDL, working in a medical facility. But there are some communities that know that after 10 years, you can apply for expungement. We just walk around with shame and don't take the jobs that we can't get. Right. But a public defender who's appointed by the governor can decide what the process is for expungement. You want to know why you should vote? Because you got to make sure that the governor appoints a public defender that tells the strata the situation where you can get something expunged. Right now, Black people are going into debt at alarming rates, not for buying red bottoms, not for buying Mercedes, but for medical debt.
Yeah.
Medical debt. Somebody got to do it. Somebody is now afraid to go check about this bump or this lump or this bad foot because they know they got debt at that hospital already. We need somebody to in politics, in government, to speak to that. If that's the number one reason people are going into debt, there's a lot of people who are silently suffering with that. When somebody comes up and brings that issue to the forefront and has a solution, those people, you don't have to convince those people to vote for that guy. If someone has a solution to my son not being able to get his CDL because he got caught with weed when he was 19, and you got a solution, you don't have to worry about me voting for him. I'm definitely going to vote for that guy. And so it's not just what happens on the 6 weeks before election day. It's got to happen year round. You got to wake up every morning. I was trained by Bonnie Watson Coleman's father. So your job is to get up every morning and figure out how to help the dude that's trying to struggle to get from the 1st of the month to the 30th of the month, how to help make his life better. Yeah. A guy that doesn't have education, doesn't have a fancy job, doesn't have a fancy car. How do you help him? That we got to make sure that we got people working who thinking about that every day, all day.
Yeah.
And James, I agree with you. I agree with you.
Go ahead, Ken.
It does take a year-round effort. It's more than just 6 weeks or 2 weeks before the election. I live with a reluctant voter who's very well informed and is disenchanted by both parties. And it's been a series of conversations, and I haven't been able to move the needle either way. He's still stuck in his position that neither party is helping enough. And he's very well informed, very community minded and active, but is reluctant. And when I asked if his registration was active, and he's like, no, it's not. I think it went, it expired. So these are the people that we still have to do the reaching out to. These are the people who are part of families who are not coming into the church. These are the ones we got to focus on year round to help convince, because sometimes they're influenced by misinformation. And we're seeing a lot of that right now, despite the enormous amount of information that we all have access to through our pockets. It's that misinformation that's still guiding a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
As I'm looking at the comments, the panel can help me with this. I seem to see an overwhelming, what I call cognitive ambiguity, where suggestions are causing people to take stances on what they believe. And I'm watching the comments, and it's clear to me that I remember when COVID started, there was a guy doing work at the house. He told me COVID was a hoax. The next day he came back to the house to do some more work, and he asked me to pray for his sister. And I said, why? He said, she's in the emergency. She's in intensive care with COVID. I said, but I thought you told me yesterday it was a hoax. There's this disconnect between reality and appealing to something that's in human beings right now that's disconnected from reason. So I'm watching the comments, and we don't specialize in understanding both sides of the argument. What we seem to lean towards, as I'm looking at the comments, is an opinion without understanding of what the other side is doing. And I think that's tragic for us. This Project 2025, it's so well written that it has you celebrating no tax on overtime, and in the same document telling you that overtime will not exist anymore. It's incredible to me that people will hear there's no overtime tax celebrated, but never get to the part where there's not going to be anything to celebrate. That our public schools are going to get less funding, private schools more, and when we go to war, we're going to get our draftees from the public school system. So if you can afford a private education, your kids are protected. You can't tell me you hate affirmative action when generational wealth is affirmative action. Mm-hmm. So what we're dealing with is people that are not informed, and I think purposely are not informed, so their emotional point of view is affirmed. Did any of that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yes, it made perfectly good sense. You know, we have covered a lot of information. I probably have like 10 questions that we didn't get to, and we're already an hour into the discussion, or at least 45 minutes into discussion. You know, I think we're talking about, well, of course, we're talking about very important things, and we've talked a little bit about the role of Dr. Pierre raised at the beginning, the role of media and social media. And I say this in the most kindest way, there's a lot of trash talking going on now in terms of misinformation and all of that. One of the things that we are bombarded with are negative messages. I've seen some commercials that I just cannot believe they're actually on, and the disclaimer on the channel says, we know this is disturbing, it's very graphic, but we have to put it on. By federal regulation, we have to play this commercial, and they are just horrendous. But to wind down, because we have to start just closing things up and allowing enough time for questions. We are in such a polarized environment these days, and there's an opinion about everything and for everything, and it can be very confusing. I am also very concerned for our young people, and what all of this means for our young people. I teach a class at Rutgers, and they're all like freshmen, sophomore, and I ask, are you all registered to vote? General response, no, we don't know anything. And I'm like, okay, this is what we're talking about. How not only do we reach them, but what can we do to help our youth envision a fair and equitable democratic process? How do we engage young people? How do we reach that person who's saying, you know what, I'm not going to bother. The system is broken. I don't want to be bothered. So in short, how do we offer hope to our young people that at this point are being bombarded with so many social media messages and all of that? How do we offer hope to them that the process does work and it can work? So that's the question we're going to probably end on. So how do we do that? How do we do that?
You know, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dr. Pierre.
You go.
So we have to meet the young people where they are. This is not the top-down generation. That ended with Gen X, my generation, where your parents would say, "Do as I say, not as I do." This is not that generation. This is not that generation. This is not a generation where you say to them, "Somebody died for the right." Don't say that to them either. These babies are different. Let me just say this. And you really have to not only meet them where they are, but approach them in a way that's very genteel. You cannot say, go vote, or you really have to be either tiptoe through the tulips when it comes to this generation. You have to ask questions that you already have the answer to in a way that is not offensive, that makes them think. And I'm really serious about this. I'm in Detroit, Michigan, working for a candidate with the young people, and I could tell you that they do not think critically or logistically or logically or anything else. You have to ask the questions that you already have the answers to in a way that makes them think, and they're like, "Oh, okay, I get it." If you go to them and you ask, "What do you think? Do you like apples or oranges?" They're gonna tell you they don't know. And I want to go back, because we got to go back to the impact that COVID had on this and that generation. 4 years of all you're doing is looking at devices, whether it's cell phone, your iPad, your computer, and your PlayStation. And some of them today are 26 years old, still playing with the PlayStation. That's what we're dealing with. It's that demographic. So half of them have no social skills because they don't know how to interact with people. The other half, the ones that do, they're going to challenge you on every single thing because they've been watching Charlemagne the God, or they've been watching some other speaker talk about things that they don't really have a full grasp of. So one, we have to listen to them. It requires a lot of patience and a lot of Jesus to listen to them, because they want to be heard. They want to be seen. And you got to be very genteel with them when it comes to your engagement with them. We tried the 6 ways from Sunday to kind of figure out this particular demographic. Yes, there are some great people, some young people who get it and they're just off to the races and they're great. But the large majority of them, and I have 3 knucklehead nephews. I tried everything. I tried to act like my daddy. That doesn't work with them. I tried acting like my mama. That doesn't work with them. I definitely ain't gonna be their mama. So I'm not gonna act that way. So I'm gonna, you gotta try everything. And so even here in Detroit, I had to bring one of my nephews. He's 26 years old here, so that he can see and understand how this process works. Because otherwise, if I don't show them, and we have to get back to showing kids, grab them by the hand and taking them places and showing them things. Otherwise, they're going to be caught up in what rapper X said, or rapper G said, or rapper D said, because that's who they listen to. And so I really encourage all the adults, set aside how grandmama raised us, or set aside how your parents raised us, because that is a totally different experience for these babies who are influenced by PlayStation all day, every day. And take them out the house and take them to so they can see and touch and feel.
I often say that we have been taught mission, but this generation is all about movement. And so their commitment is different, but it's not wrong. It's not an and or. It's really a both if we create it as a both. And so, to piggyback on everything that Marilyn said as well, what I wanted to say is that we got to listen to them. We got to take the time to hear their voices, see where they stand, because a lot of these young folks are dealing with a lot of stuff that we didn't have to deal with. I'm a baby boomer, so I'm on the last year of the baby boomers. And the things that I had to worry about are not the things that these kids have to worry about in this day and time. And so many of them will say, you're not listening to me. You're not allowing me to share with you what I feel. Even if we may think it doesn't make sense, it makes sense to them. And so if we want to reach them, we got to find a place in them to be able to hear what they're saying. And it's easy for us to combat what they're saying when it doesn't make sense, but you can't go there. And like you said, Marilyn, I mean, and we grew up in, you know, in the DNC world where you listened and you were scared of people. You did what Mignon said to do, and you know, and you were all right. You were taken care of. But you know, and she wasn't this mean person, but she was hard on us to ensure that we did what we needed to do. And she always reached back. And so you know, there wasn't a person in the lineage that, you know, like if you look at Mignon now, she's not calling us for help. She's making sure the young folk that were our age back then when she called us are now the ones that she's calling and bringing in the fold to groom them up. So, you know, at some point we had to grow up and say, wow, I don't get to play in the sandbox anymore. That's not fair. But I see how she progresses in terms of how she ensures that young Black men and young Black women are always engaged in the political process. And I think when we start, like James is like a legend on the Hill. James is the man on the Hill. And so to have a James come and lecture for Bishop Evans, right? So we should be doing some kind of civic engagement training throughout the year. And have a Marilyn, have a James, have a Doug Palmer, or whomever else is nearby that could come and talk about different issues as it relates to engagement. Have the state party NAACP person. NAACP is doing a lot of stuff. You got all of these affinity groups out there. Mike McBride is doing, you know, Win with Black Church. You got Dr. Barbara Skinner doing Faith United to Save Democracy. You got the NAACP doing Faith Forward. So you got a lot of educated people that can share and share throughout the year with webinars. So we just got to come to where they are and not ignore what they say.
I also think we've got to give young people, I know you have to talk to them differently, but we've got to set rules. We don't have rules anymore, right? Like, I think that rules saved me in politics, right? And so when I worked in Congress, some of the young Black staffers would get some paperwork from a Republican staffer and go, oh, this is a good idea. This will help us with the job creators. I'm like, that's not our language. Right? Like, so I had to explain to them. I had to put together a list of things that we believe. And so, you know, there are things that I just believe that we have to always fight for. I believe in reparations. I don't have to argue with you about it. That's what I believe. Reparations are real. It's the least you could do. I don't want to argue or debate. That's what it is. And we have to have speak with that with the same intensity that people love Israel. We believe in reparations. We have to say we believe in unions. Yes, unions are racist, but Black people fare better under a unionized household than without a unionized household. So we believe in unions. We believe that you shouldn't monetize justice. That if you get paid to lock us up, you're gonna lock more of us up. So we don't believe in paying a private company to pay for my bracelet on my foot so I can go home, because you will just put more bracelets on more Black people's feet. So we don't believe in monetized justice. Either there's justice or it's not justice. You shouldn't make money from justice. We believe that there's zero tolerance for laughter about slavery. We take slavery very seriously. We don't play about slavery, right? And anything that looks like slavery, we're opposed to. We believe in free and equal public education, right? We got to have a few things that we just believe in all the way. You know, when you talk to a Jewish American, there's certain things that they will not debate you about. Do you support Israel? If you don't, they're not with you. We got to be that way about our issues. I support reparations the same way. I support free and equal education the same way. That Pookie may be raised by a horrible mother and a horrible father, but he can go down the street and that public school is so good that he can change the trajectory of his life and the lives that are part of him. And any attempt to stop that, whether it's a charter school, a half a school, or taking money out, a 2025, a 2026, anything that stops that, we're against it. We believe in free public schools. right? So I think we got to figure out what it is we believe, and everybody's got to sing from the same sheet. We don't do that. That's monetization of justice. We don't believe in monetization of justice. You can't mandate that I wear this ankle bracelet and then charge me for it. You can't do that. We don't believe in that. And none of our politicians believe in that. And none of our community believe in that. And if you believe in that, we're going to come get you the next election. And when we start talking from the same sheet, we have real power.
Absolutely. Any other final thoughts on that question?
Well, I think based on what I'm seeing in the comments, a lot of people are not aware of what Project 2025 actually says and how it's going to impact our lives in foundational ways. Public education, Medicare, and Social Security, all on the chopping block. Humorously, Jesus's name is mentioned in the Bible so much, you know he's involved in it. Trump's name is 300 and some odd times in Project 2025. So to believe he has no connection to it when it's really about his presidency, it's kind of la-la land to me. If God and Jesus is involved in the Bible, based upon how many times they're in the Bible, then 300 times mentioned in the document means you're involved. In that context, the basics of what James just talked about are the things that are going to be changed. Why? Because there's no new money in government. Zina taught me this. There's no new money in government. They move money from one thing to another. So if they reduce the taxes, which is the income, they've got to make it up somewhere else. Historically, it's made up on middle Americans and poor people and programs being cut. That's why this leaning towards the wealthy is ultimately going to be at the expense of working people, normal folk, everyday people. But somebody's got us drunk. We're intoxicated, thinking that there's going to be some new money coming from somewhere. It's not. The programs that we depend upon as a people are going to be cut. The overtime, all that's going out the window. Medicare, Social Security, they're going to take away people's pensions. Now, in New Jersey, we know that's possible. We've seen it done from the governor level. Pensions were just taken away. So we know it can be done, and we know it's done without conscience. So people are making a lot of comments and not really knowing. It's not fear mongering, it's facts. So it's like COVID, y'all. I take care of my 92-year-old aunt. I was overcautious about COVID. She couldn't catch it from me, and all I could say was that I didn't think, or I didn't know it would affect her this way. I had to protect her. I didn't think, and it didn't appeal to me that these negative things, right? It's not enough explanation. We've got to be preventive. And preventiveness comes from understanding and knowledge. So what am I saying? I'm looking at the comments. People are asking these questions. I'm telling you, programs are going to finally be cut. There's no way they can do it without it. I'm going to tell you that the normal working person is not going to have a good time under this Project 2025. And you can no longer say black man with a passport that he's not involved because he's in the document 325 times. So let's go read it so you can see his name. I'm done.
But also,
it's one of the things I want to throw out there, because I think we also have to be mindful of the culture that surrounds both candidates, right?
Absolutely.
And that said, when we look at this what we call AI, artificial intelligence, that's moving around, and we saw what happened with NAFTA in the 90s, the North American Free Trade Agreement. that as a result of that agreement that then said the United States and Canada and Mexico, the three countries can move goods around the three, right? And as a result of that, as I sit here in Detroit, that was severely impacted because those auto jobs, a lot of those auto jobs left Detroit and were moved to Mexico or were moved down south and right to work states. So it's really important that we understand the vision of the candidates and how it could impact us. You know, there was a point in time in history when Detroit was a bustling city. Now it is on the rebound. It's coming back, but it's coming back very different than what it was before. So the Black middle class that existed here, there's been a change in that, right? So we've lost those good union jobs that provided middle class lifestyle so that parents could send their kids to the University of Michigan or Michigan State or Howard University or other schools outside of Detroit. So those jobs are now gone. And now we're seeing the shift in that in technology. Now technology jobs are that's the golden egg, the goose with the golden egg. But if we don't have college education, we're not trained in cybersecurity or trained in coding, then we're not going to get those jobs. And so if AI continues to become more mainstream and then it replaces jobs that we used to have, what is going to happen to us? So you want a person at the helm who's going to think about the impact of these policy decisions on the Black workforce in particular. And also you want people who have relationships with the powers that be. If I can't get to the president, I could get to Congressman so-and-so or Congresswoman so-and-so who could then carry this message to make sure that my congregation who once had those jobs at Ford or who once had those jobs in the manufacturing sectors in New Jersey, they're no longer there. My parishioners who used to work on that for the Turnpike Authority, but now it's all automated, so those jobs aren't there. But I need access to the policy makers and the decision makers so I can advocate for my parishioners. Mm-hmm. And so we have to be worldly and recognize that there are things that are happening. I told my nephew today, I said, listen, as we're moving around Detroit, you have to read the paper, the Detroit News. He says, oh, I like Detroit. This is not what I expected coming from Houston. I said, but you got to read the local paper. I said, but I want you to read the business section. Don't read the sports section. Mm-hmm. You can understand what's coming in and what's going out. Mm-hmm. And we have to get back to that. And even if we're going to have a brunch at the church and we're going to have these conversations so that we can bring together all of us the lawyers, the economists, the academicians, the teachers, the doctors, the union workers, so we can have these conversations and understand what's happening in our economy. And so we understand why it's important to be attuned to who is leading us. Are they leading us to the river? Because be concerned about what's going to happen in 7 days.
Let me just,
I'm sorry, that's probably.
Go ahead.
I just want to give you an example of what they're trying to do with 2025. So a friend of mine went to college with me at Morehouse College, and when he finished, we all made fun of him because he took the test at a major city to become a fireman. And we're like, what is he doing? We're all trying to get corporate jobs. We're trying to get in politics. Why is he taking the test? And then we never heard anything else. And then 7 years later, he becomes a fireman. And we made fun of him again. Why is he trying to be a fireman? So during the DNC, which was in Chicago, I gave it away to city. He went, he and I had lunch. And I said to him, man, why are you a fireman? He said, in 1994, graduated from Morehouse College, he took the test to be a fireman, and they told him he did not pass the test. 7 years later, after being a teacher, he got a call. Somebody sued the fire department. He found out that he got a 92 on his test, and 16 white boys got a 70, and they all got accepted, and he didn't get accepted. And a white woman got a 92, and she didn't get accepted either, and she sued. And when they opened the books, everybody who scored higher than a 70, the people that got on the list, they got offered $6,000, or you could join the force. And I didn't know that his grandfather was on the force and his father was on the force, and so he jumped to become a fireman. And from that, once you become a fireman, you can go to Chicago State for $50 a semester and get a master's degree in fire science. Once you become a fireman, you can get a loan to buy a house in the skirts of Chicago for zero money down. So he took advantage of everything that he was supposed to do. Now, the settlement for the lawsuit for them taking you, you got $6,000. He refused the settlement, and he immediately became a fireman. But the guys that got in 4 years before him now were advanced and were captains. So he got paid like a captain, even though he had just gotten on the force. My point is, my friend has gotten $250,000 worth of benefits from being a fireman away from his salary.
Wow.
But when I talk to him, he says that there is a John McCluskey on the force, on the fire department, and a Paul McCluskey and a Sam McCluskey. Like a whole family is a part of that. A whole family has had a middle-class lifestyle because somebody got them on the force. They didn't have the scores necessarily. Somehow they got the scores and they got accepted. The 2025 wants to eliminate diversity, inclusion, and discrimination lawsuits. And what would happen as a result of that? You wouldn't be able to look, and you wouldn't be able to do a lawsuit to find out. And the entire department of the fire department, by the way, the fire department could be a $200,000 job with overtime that you don't have to go to college for. So the athletic brothers that's working at the gym could be working as a fireman, making $200,000 with benefits, with a mortgage program, with the ability to go to get a tuition assistance, all that. But we get denied that. And the only way that we fight against that is to take it to the courts. They want to take the courts away. That's right. The point of 2025 is every way that we can make sure that you're not near us. You're not near us educationally. You're not near us financially. You're certainly not near us being able to live near us. That's what they want to do. They want to eliminate you and put you in a box on the side of town by yourself and never have to deal with you. That's what 2025 is. And they want to erase your history as if everything that's happened to you is because of you. They want you not to remember that you were stolen from the shores of Africa, placed in cattle slavery, dealt with discrimination up until, there was a black president. So you know what 2025 is. It's attempting to take away all efforts to fight against those things that try to kill us every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's why we gotta vote to protect and preserve our civil rights.
Right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
If there's I was trying to put it in the chat, but I'm not allowed to do that. But there's a piece that Otis Moss III put together and really, really unpacked 2025 so that we could see it in layman's terminology. Bishop, I emailed it to you. Okay. But take a look at that because it's really powerful. And I think that when we can read simple things like this, because we are visual people, this right here is information that can really arm us to know that, when you cast your vote, you're casting it for not just a free, fair, and safe election, but your future and your children's future. So please vote early.
I got a feeling we could probably talk for about another 3 hours just on Project 2025. But we did promise the virtual audience that we'd try and get a couple of questions in. So we're just going to load a couple questions in. I think the first one is from Sid, that we can go through that. And I'm trying to see if I can see it on my screen. But it looks like parts of Project 2025 are already set up and have been for years. How do we put the brakes on them, especially the glasses, especially on regard to judge. There you go. Sorry, I couldn't make it really small.
Gotta vote.
So that's gotta vote. Okay, anybody else?
Gotta vote. Because Project 2025 is the blueprint, and there's people that do not want to accept that what they're writing is what they're going to do. So we need to understand that is what James said. Everything that we have gained and our ability to protest any injustice goes away with Project 2025.
Mm-hmm.
There was a woman that ran for president in 2016 that unfortunately lost. And as a result, there are a lot of programs that have been put in place, particularly judges that were put in place by the last administration. And that's what we got. And we're going to live with them for the next 30, 40 years because we did not go to the polls.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think we have another question from Benita. All of this is a great discussion. What can we do in these last 6 days to get us over the finish line? What a great question to end with. What can we do in the last 6 days?
Encourage people to vote and vote yourself.
Okay.
I would say try to double and triple your vote by involving your car, bringing people to the polls. How many people can you bring to the polls over the next week? That's one way you can double and triple your vote, and that will help. Look at the senior citizen buildings around you. Do they need help getting to the polls? Make yourself, if you have time available, make yourself available.
What we're seeing here is that we're seeing baby boomers in particular are coming out to vote.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Gen Zs and the Gen As. So I would encourage those of us who have relationships with the young people, create a phone list, a phone tree of people we're going to call and then say, have you voted yet? Early vote has started in most states. I would encourage folks to vote early so we can go ahead and bank those votes. So I would ask you to write down a list of 10 to 20 people that we know and say, have you voted yet? Especially our knucklehead nephews, call them and say, have you voted yet? And then you may want to get into an exchange about what they see, what they value, what they think is important. The conversation I had with my nephew today was, what is your vision for life? Right. And so again, meet them where they are and you bring them in so that you can kind of share with them what's happening in the government space, politically, the policy decisions that have been made that will impact their vision for their lives. And way too often, young people don't even have a thought about their vision. They're still living for today. And so we need to pour into them so that they're thinking about this. And then therefore, we can encourage them to vote because the politics will impact their lives.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, it sounds like the adage that we heard during the convention, do something, just do something. And so I wanted to thank everyone for participating in our panel tonight. It was fascinating and so informative. With the election being 6-7 days away, I wanted to ask one final thought. Do you have a final pep talk, a final call to action to everyone watching or listening to this conversation? It goes sort of connects very nicely to Benita's conversation. Is there a final pep talk you can give us about how do we get motivated? How do we move? How do we get re-engaged into the political process? And we will end on that.
I think we've got to make sure that everyone knows that the people that we can depend on, the folk who have saved the Republic more than one occasion, are Black females that are over the age of 50. And therefore, if you know anybody that doesn't fit that demographic, you need to call them. I would start with, you have in your most phones your frequent call list. Don't have a frequent call list full of people who don't vote. So you should check to see the people that you talk to all the time that are on speed dial. Make sure that your speed dial crew are people that actually vote. And then check out the laws. There are some states, and this is crazy to me, it tells you that there's some people that they don't want to vote. There are some states that allow you to vote to register the day before, and there's some states that allow you to register the day of. You'll notice that the states where we are mostly, that is not the case. But there are states where that happens. If you can take a look at ways that you can get folk registered now, then you should do that. And you should try to increase to make sure that your entire circle is full of voters.
Mm-hmm.
I would say is, to piggyback of making a plan to vote. A lot of people don't, a lot of ex-felons, at least in Maryland, if you are an ex-felon, you can still register to vote. If you have served out your time, you can register to vote. Maryland, we're also a state that you can vote the same day that you register. I took a young man the other day, 39 years old, with a disability, and had never registered to vote and was eligible to vote. And he's a young man in my church. I drove him to the polls. I assisted him with getting himself registered and helping him with, the ballot. And he walked out there feeling like empowered, excited. And that's one person. So imagine how many people are in our family that we have no clue, have not voted, may not be registered, just decided not to be bothered with it, that we could call or text today and say, listen, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pick you up every year. God bless my mom and my aunt's soul. I never missed an election without picking my mother up, picking her sister up, and her sister, and her sister's husband. Anybody who needed a ride that was a senior, I made certain that I got them to the polls. We got to do that. And listen, if you feel intimidated, you get to the polls and you feel like something's going on that's not right, or you're having challenges legally with whatever, you can call, there's an NAACP number, 1-866-OUR-VOTE, 1-866-OUR-VOTE. Call that number if you have any challenges. Now, yes, you can call the local election board, but if you feel like there's some level of whatever dirty, whatever mess going on, call that number. And there's a hotline with lawyers on staff that can help you walk through whatever you're dealing with. Thank you.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, if we don't have any other final thoughts, I just want to thank our panelists for sharing your wisdom, sharing your knowledge, and reigniting us or those who have been disengaged and feeling like this doesn't matter. So I encourage our virtual audience to once again share this conversation. It'll be uploaded on all our social media platforms. Watch it again because it was a lot of valuable information that we spoke about tonight. But talk about this with your friends, your family, your neighbors, all of it. It comes back down to do something. So I thank you for joining us tonight. And just remember, your voice is your vote. Your voice is your vote. Thank you, panelists. We enjoyed you, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
All right. Thank you.